Words are like my sun, my moon, my earth, the blood of my transmission, conveying visions as you listen. I sort them with conviction. Words are ammunition, knowledge, intelligence, diction. Words are where I'm capable of going and what I'm able to see, and for opening the minds of those who flee. Words are for freedom, thought, research, data, signals, symbols, science, categorizing, surprising, rejoicing, provoking, everything and everyone. Knowledge, skill, vocabulary, rhythm, word up, poetry. Do you have a voice?
I'd like to welcome everybody to the 5th episode of Word Up, What's the Word podcast. My name is Eva, and today we have a very special guest, Maya Jupiter. And right now you're listening to her song called Inshallah off of her album called Never Said Yes. Right after this, we'll get into a conversation with Maya Jupiter.
Inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, that's what my mama said. Inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah. One day I will look into your eyes, one day I will hear your first cry, shelter you from the world outside. You'll always be my joy and pride, with unconditional love and affection, an undeniable spiritual connection. And on the day you arrive, I lift you up to the sky and sing Inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, that's what my mama said. Inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah. One day all the fighting will cease, one day soon there will be peace, and she will know your name. She will take away all the pain. She will leave no bomb, no gun. When we come together as one, after winter must come spring, and with all my friends I sing Inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, that's what my mama said. Inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah. I touch my belly and I wonder if it's silly to feel so many feelings like, is this happening really? Will I be a good mother? Will I know what's best? Will she love me unconditionally even when I'm stressed? Will she be fair, unbiased and just? A woman to be loved and a friend you can trust, who's fighting for freedoms and the voices unheard. I'm telling the whole world, get ready for this girl. Powerful, kind, educated and funny, compassionate to strangers, generous with the money. And I'll teach her to keep faith in her heart, even when the system tries to pull her apart. With the promise of tomorrow within you, you'll always be my strength to continue. Take all our worries and give us all blessings. God willing, there'll be no more stressing. Inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, that's what my mama said. Inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, that's what my mama said. Inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, that's what my mama said. Inshallah, mashallah.
First of all, thank you for taking the time. If you could start off by talking about being born in Mexico and then growing up in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. Thank you for having me and sharing my music. I appreciate it. I moved to Australia when I was 1 year old, and being born in Mexico. Hang on a second. Sorry. Could hear my husband in the background. So
Oh, yes.
Just wanted to shut the door. Sorry.
No problem.
So yeah, being born in Mexico and then growing up in Australia really gave me that experience of being, from neither here nor there. From what I understand now is this Chicana identity. And it definitely placed me, in the early years in the 80s, growing up in Western Sydney. I was part of, my family were part of these new migrants moving to these white Australian areas. So I remember facing a lot of racism as a child, being asked in elementary school, where were you born? And, answering Mexico, and then them telling me to go back to my own country and not really understanding what that meant,
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? Because Australia is all I had ever known. But, then growing up, and as a teenager, I didn't really experience it amongst my friends. I mean, being a minority was the majority at my high school. It was very multicultural, people from all over the world. And I always talk about this because I think that when people outside of Australia have a picture of what Australia is, it's usually the blonde-haired, blue-eyed surfer, not the really, multiracial community that we are. And my school had a high population of Greek students.
Oh, wow.
People of Greek descent, and then we had Italian, you had Vietnamese, Chinese, Filipino, you had all the Pacific Islands, New Zealand, Tonga, Fiji, Samoa. Like it was it was very, people from all over.
Right.
And that was my experience. And I think in my teenage years is when I really fell in love with hip hop, because it felt like this, a place of belonging.
Right. And so what was your introduction to hip hop? Like, was there a moment where you're like, I'm down with this culture, or was it kind of a slow?
It was really an awakening, because I think, first of all, being exposed to rap through pop radio, so through artists like De La Soul, or dare I say Vanilla Ice with Ice Ice Baby.
I mean, it sold 10 million copies, so it's bound to reach,
But, alongside that, I remember I was probably 11 or 12 years old, and, and buying Crisscross Jump Around, it's probably around the same age as those kids. And it was one of like the first CDs that I bought, like CD singles, because this is when CDs started coming in.
Yeah.
But, I was exposed through pop radio. I started rapping in high school, and I had a group of friends that didn't go to my school, but that, we were all kind of MCs. And one was sort of, some guys were starting to make beats and all that kind of thing. I thought it was just us. Like, I thought we're the only group in Sydney, the only group of people in Sydney who are, creating hip hop music. And at that point, I didn't know that it was a culture. I didn't understand. I had no idea about the four elements, nothing, because I wasn't exposed. I was still in school, So let me see, it was around just after 18. I'd even gone to New York. I'd saved up all my money. I used to work in a shoe store. And, it's funny because Australians, we travel. It's in our culture to work hard and then travel the world, and go see places. We love getting out there. There's a travel agent in every shopping center, like it's very common to have that as a goal. And I remember sacrificing like my, having a portion of my paycheck go toward this fund that for 2 years I saved up with that goal. Like, I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to go to the Mecca.
instead of my schoolies, which is, you know, like the Australian version of when people go to, where do they go in Mexico? Cancun or something for their spring break.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than doing the Australian version of that, I was like, I'm not going to partake in that. I'm going to go to New York because I need to see where hip hop was born. And even on those travels and doing that, I still had no idea of the community and culture that lived in Australia, that existed in Australia, and the history of it in Australia, because I had not been exposed to it.
Right.
So finally, and also here's another thing. In Australia, the legal drinking age is 18. So so that's why I think a lot of doors opened, because you can start going to concerts, you can start going to clubs, you can start being involved in the scene from the age of 18, which is, really cool, as opposed to here waiting till you're 21. But what happened was there was a 10-day hip hop festival called Urban Expressions. I saw the advertisement for it in one of those free newspapers that used to go around, and they were having a panel discussion at the university. And I went along, and that day was the first day of the 10 days. Those 10 days changed my life. And everyone that I met that first day, like I am still friends with today, are like, to me, like the core Sydney hip hop group, really. It exposed me to hip hop as a culture. It exposed me to the community that exists, the people that exist in all areas, all elements, and the love that people had for it. And also the history, starting to learn, like, wow, graffiti art, is the first element that arrived to Australia. So, and then, MCs recording their first album in the 80s. And then, of course, progressing and trying to find its own identity, hip hop as what is Australian hip hop. And then within that, how is Aussie hip hop sometimes taken to mean white Australian hip hop and excluding people of color and Indigenous Australians, right? So there's definitely a lot of nuances.
Yeah. And so is this where you were meeting like MC Trey and DJ Nick Toth?
Yes. Trey, I met Trey that very first day she was on the panel.
Yeah.
Trey is actually one of the promoters of the Urban Expressions Festival.
Gotcha.
And she's, so she's just a very well-respected, legendary MC. She's from Fiji, her family are from Fiji. But I met her in those early days. We started doing community workshops together. So we would teach really just facilitating songwriting workshops with youth, Sydney's youth. And we had always done shows together. And we finally decided, we should just make an album. And Nick is a really good friend of ours. He's a DJ and producer, originally from Austria. And Nick was the DJ in the legendary group Metabase and Breath, which was a hip hop band that featured an MC from New York named Baba Israel. Elf Transporter was also from the States, and Morganics was like the three men up front. And they were just, to me, such a beautiful group of people who, would see me in the crowd as a youngin', as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, and say, hey, Maya, come up on stage, and invite me to just freestyle with them as part of their show, and they were always doing that with the youth, just welcoming us and really creating this beautiful space that I understand hip hop to be, that cipher, that energy, that kind of each one teach one philosophy. That's definitely where I learned it.
And so your trip to New York, I just, were there certain spots that you just felt like you needed to visit? Because that's when I went to New York on a similar type of trip, I was like 1520 Sedgwick Avenue. Like
that's it. I didn't do it that time, but because I didn't know about it. I have not only I'm so lucky. So later on in life, just because I love music and hip hop music, I became a radio and TV presenter, and I got to do a television show called the Freestyle Countdown, and we went to New York, and I lined up an interview with the wonderful DJ Kool Herc, the godfather of hip hop, and he took me to that spot, to that intersection. And
I have both arms up in the air right now. I know you probably can't see me. That's what it's all about. Yeah.
Yes. And we drove around and he pointed out, this is where this spot used to be. This is, and these buildings are no longer there, or they're turned into other things.
Yeah.
But we took a little tour, and he showed me, that light post where they took the electricity out and made the first party. And getting to meet his sister as well. Cindy is, she's beautiful. And that was one of the highlights of my life.
Yeah.
But on the first trip, I had where I was so green that I had no idea. Like I landed in Newark thinking I was in New York. Because that's what I had said to the travel agent. I want to go to New York. And she booked my flight into Newark. So I'm getting off the plane and just chatting with, I think I'm on a train, I'm chatting with someone next to me. He's like, "You're in New Jersey." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "This is not New York, this is New Jersey." And because my so naive, but my plan was to find a backpackers somewhere, because in Sydney, again, we have backpackers everywhere because people travel. So I'm thinking I'm just going to find a backpackers and I'll be fine. He was like, "We don't have those here." And he led me to this motel kind of place. It's a funny story. I actually only had enough money to spend a week. I was supposed to stay 2 weeks, and I couldn't afford longer than a week because of the motel prices. But I had gone to the Nuyorican's Poet Cafe. I had, you just look for the stores with the gear and the, I don't know, you just try to find it. I can't remember how. I went to a night that had hip hop on. I met this guy who was, I can't remember his name right now, but he was just blown away that I was there by myself traveling. And he was like, "Let me take you to all the spots." So he took me to this internet radio station. It's one of the first ones at the time, called 88 Hip Hop. And
I remember 88 Hip Hop. Sure.
Yes. Yeah. And I met Miss Moni Love there, and they put me on air. And they were like, "What are you doing here?" And everyone was just blown away that I'm this kid traveling from Australia just because I love hip hop by myself. So he tells his auntie, who is a teacher and a middle school teacher in the Bronx, about me. She says she's welcome to stay at my house for the week. I would love her to stay with us, and could she come in and speak to my students? So so I ended up staying with his auntie and got to go in and talk to the students. And I thought I was going to answer questions about, koalas and kangaroos and things. And they were not interested in Australia at all. They were like, "We heard you rap." They're like, "Rap for us." And this is all, brown and black kids, like Puerto Rican and black kids from the Bronx. I was like, this is like the toughest crowd, right? I was like, oh my God.
That might be tougher than the Apollo right there.
And the way they were all looking at me. And one girl, I guess her name was Kim. She's like, "I'm little Kim." And this is, little Kim, Foxy Brown were like at their height. I was like, "I'm Foxy Brown." I was like, wow. And so I rapped, and they loved me, and they were so sweet. And it was just such a crazy life experience. Hip hop just is a passport. It opens doors everywhere.
No, absolutely. And these are the types of stories and conversations that I like to find. It's just like, love of hip hop, and just how it may get you different places in the world, meeting new people. And that's awesome. So at this time, you didn't have any type of music out, no CD, no product. You just went to New York for the.
I had a couple of rhymes and in my head, and that was it. And dreams, dreams in my heart.
Love it. And then so you released the album Foreign Heights with MC Trey and DJ Nick, and then you moved to LA. And so
Yes. Well, a few other things in between. I released my debut solo album in 2003. That was on a all-female hip-hop label called Mother Tongues.
okay.
And which was, quite advanced for the early 2000s, I would say. And Trey, of course, was on that. We were on a compilation together, and then I released a solo album. I was also in an 11-piece Latin jazz hip-hop band called Son Veneno. We released an album together. That was just pure joy. Like my heart is in the performance. Like I enjoy the recording and the writing process, but to me, it's all about being on stage and connecting with people and just, that energy that you feel when you're all together. And Son Veneno were just my heart and soul. Like I felt like all of me was represented when I was with them. When I would, on my solo album, I had this song that had a Spanish singing chorus. And I would dance on stage because I'm also a dancer. I learned, salsa and samba, and I did ballet, tap, and jazz when I was a kid, and dancing is part of me. And I remember reading on an online forum somebody dissing me, saying, "Oh, she just shakes her hips on stage," or that there's no singing. Like if you sing in your choruses, and that's not hip hop. Just stupidity like that existed. Right. But now, in my early 20s, not really processing it, but now as a grown woman, fully in myself, understanding it's not just sexist, but it's also, racist. It's also dissing my culture, my heritage, who I am. And that was me desperately trying to connect with my Mexican heritage, because there were no Mexicans in Sydney. There's about 1,000, the census counted around 1,000 Mexicans in the state of New South Wales. So, very, very few. And Sydney is the city of, 5 million people. And there was no community. And also understand, like my mom is Turkish. So what I found is the people that were part of Mexican community in Sydney were all connected because their mothers are Mexican. And the mums are the ones that get together and hold culture and space. So, they hold community. That's what I discovered.
Absolutely. The matriarch.
Exactly. And so I didn't have that connection. And to me, I would always explore it through my music. Because that, to me, hip hop is, an expression of self. And to me, that was being the most authentic I could be, is to always tap into those roots. And it's just how it always came out of me. I'm a straight up hip hop head, but when I look at my catalog, I'm like, oh, my stuff always tends to go to my heritage, and that's okay because it's who
I think that's the authenticity of hip hop, is bringing your own story, right? And so when it's trying to do something else, that's when it's just like it doesn't. I don't think it works. But when someone comes and just like, this is who I am, and I think that's what hip hop is all about.
I agree, but I didn't feel received in that way all the time back home within the hardcore hip hop community, if that makes sense. Which was probably really the white Australian community. Not all, I have to say, not all. But those were probably the ones that were the most critical of that. Yeah. So anyway, Son Veneno, and then Foreign Heights. And then, yes, I finally, 2008, I moved to the United States because my current boyfriend, Aloe Black, was living in Los Angeles.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. I put him on the map. We were dating for a year. We had been together long distance for 1 year, and it was getting difficult. And I was like, all right, something's got to change because I can't do this much longer. And he had released Shine Through, That's how we met. He was in Melbourne doing the Red Bull Music Academy.
Okay.
And I was down there filming for Channel V, the show that I was working on.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked to interview him. I chose him because I loved his album. I knew that there's a funny story about receiving his CD on my desk when I was at the radio station. And because I get CDs from record companies all the time, and I'd always sort of divide it up between, record labels, and I would, okay, Stone's Throw, I'm going to listen to that pile first, because you got to find a way to prioritize. So I remember listening and just going from track to track to track, reading the bio, and just thinking to myself, man, if I lived in LA, we'd totally be friends.
Right.
I just thought, we had so much in common musically. A lot of people don't realize he's first generation American. His parents migrated from Panama. Similar experiences. And
right.
I was totally into reggae dancehall at the time, attending these dancehall nights that Nick Toth would put on, and just love the freedom of the dance in that genre. And Aloe had these dancehall songs. He had salsa songs that he did covers of on that album. He had hip hop, he had soul. It was just like, wow, Shine Through was such a brilliant album.
Yeah.
And so,
So this is his solo album. Is this before? So Eminem would be before.
Eminem predates everything. Eminem, I think they met in high school. Yeah.
Okay.
DJ Exile and Aloe met in high school.
Okay. And so
not going to the same high school, but when they were of that age as teenagers.
I got you. And so then you moved to LA. And so what would you say some of the differences that you moving to LA or Australia?
Sydney, I would say Sydney, because, both countries are very vast and different depending where you go. But, there's a lot of similar things. Australia's been called the 51st state of America. I don't know if you know that. But we are quite Americanized. We're dominated by American music and movies and culture. But we also have the English side as well, because we're still a Commonwealth country. I think culturally the biggest difference was the sarcasm. And as Australians, we're known as to be larrikins. We make fun of each other. We make fun of ourselves all the time. We put ourselves down. We put each other down. We swear our butts off. See, I'm even censoring myself now. I really had to learn to not cuss as much. It's funny because I'll say things that's self-deprecating, which is totally normal in our culture, because if you big yourself up, then you're a wanker, essentially, we don't do that. We just don't prop ourselves. And I think there's a middle ground somewhere between the two cultures. I think, having confidence and displaying that is okay, but being egotistical and a narcissist and egomaniac, not so good. But so I think there's definitely a middle ground. But I remember saying something self-deprecating and somebody being very concerned. Oh no, don't say that about yourself. You're fantastic. And I was like, oh gosh, okay, I won't do that again. So just kind of learning those little tiny cultural differences. But similar. We do have better beaches. We have beautiful beaches, but that beach culture, outdoor lifestyle, you have that here. We don't have the magnificent mountains that Los Angeles has. Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, the biggest thing about moving to LA, that's not the word I want to say. The thing that my heart most desired was to connect with the Mexican community, to be immersed in Chicano-Chicana culture, and to be with my people, if that makes sense, because I had longed for that. I had a beautiful upbringing, and I love Sydney to death. I love the experience that I had, growing up there and coming into adulthood. But that one thing was missing, being around people who understood, who got me, who even had a connection to their indigeneity. And that was something for me that was always missing. I know I'm Indigenous, but I don't have any cultural practices or traditions that come along with that. And that was that is still something I'm, you know, in the current search of. And you know, I met DJ Bean, Harvey Martinez. DJ Bean DJ'd for Aslan Underground. And I met Aslan Underground, came to Adelaide in the early 2000s to play an Indigenous music festival. And I was there with MC Trey before we were Foreign Heights. She just invited me to come along to do a few songs on her set and to back her up. And it was so funny because Nick was there as well. And this is all pre-Foreign Heights. But we went to that festival. There was a group from, you know, Māori female MCs from New Zealand, Aotearoa, and groups from all over. But Aslan Underground were the act that I wanted to see, because here were these Chicanos, you know, rapping, mixing rock and hip hop and telling these stories and, you know, representing, you know, being Indigenous and all of these things that I was like, oh my gosh, they're amazing, you know, just in awe. I meet them after the show and the same feeling was reflected back to me. It was like, what is a Mexican doing down here? And Harvey, you know, I love him so much. I have just so much gratitude. I'm so grateful for that man. He stayed in contact with me over the years, you know, in and out as technology changed. I remember him finding me on MySpace. He would mail me physical CDs of LA artists, also Matley and Quetzal and Leela Downs. And, you know, he would just send me music. And eventually he was like, I told him, hey, I'm coming to LA. And it was him. He was like, what do you want to do here? And he introduced me to 2Mex, which was amazing, right? Yeah. But at that moment, I had arrived in 2008 in April. And at that time, I was like, you know, I want to explore live music, not hip hop looped beats. I just wanted to kind of go down this path of the musicality of, you know, just what else is possible. And also, side note, my ex-cuñado, my ex-brother-in-law, is a Mexican harpist from Veracruz. He is a jarocho. He's from Jalapa, Veracruz. He played with a folkloric group called Tiamuicani, and they played son jarocho music and traveled the world. And he met my sister, and they had a couple of kids, and they were married for over 10 years. No longer together, but through that experience, I danced folklorico. He taught me folklorico dance. I danced zapatillado in his group. He created a mariachi group in Australia. So I was exposed to son jarocho. I was exposed to mariachi. I was exposed to all these other Latin rhythms. And I said, I want to kind of go down this live music path. So Harvey introduced me to Quetzal Flores and Dr. Marta Gonzalez. And that was within 3 months of landing in Los Angeles. Yeah. And if you know these wonderful people, you will know that once you land there in that space, like they just introduced me to everyone. The Mujeres de Maíz community, exactly, family. I remember attending Mujeres de Maíz, and that was just like, wow, you know, I'm home. That just felt like, okay, this is where I need to be. You know, amazing. I'm still so grateful. And I think that's the missing piece that I had been longing for my whole life.
And so that leads into your self-titled album, Maya Jupiter, which Flores co-produced along with Dr. or Marta Gonzalez, right?
Yeah. So what happened was they had just come back from Jalapa. She had a Fulbright scholarship, and she had been they had been there for 9 months. They were transitioning. She was about to go to Seattle to start her master's program or doctorate PhD program, I should say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so they had this little tiny window of space, I think a couple months in LA. So we ended up just having like 6 jam sessions in the living room where they were living. Quetzal set up microphones in the lounge room, and we just went for it. And Aloe was part of those sessions, and Quincy McCrary and Juan El Único Perez on bass. Quincy's a fantastic pianist, keyboardist with Quetzal, and of course all his own projects. And we just jammed. And Marta and Quetzal ended up producing that in Seattle. So we did it long distance. After those sessions were done in real life. And that was the album I always wanted to make. That was my dream album, and it happened. And it blows me away that it happened within 3 months of, landing in LA. And that has always been a highlight of my artistic career, I guess you can say.
Yeah, and so this is about the time where I'm introduced to your music.
Okay.
And I knew, actually I had heard of Foreign Heights before, but I didn't realize it was you until years later.
That's crazy.
At this time, I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I grew up in San Antonio, and I moved to the Coachella Valley to teach. So I'm a high school teacher at this time, and we started putting on this student-led festival. And I think it was the second year that we put on this festival, and we got Quetzal and Celia to perform. Then you came, and I was just blown away. I was like, yes, like because you weren't on the flyer. It was like you were just a special guest.
Yes, I remember.
And I was like, special guest? Like, this is the guest.
And I remember him, Quetzal, saying, hey, you want to come to Coachella with us? Like, hell yeah. And he was like, this is the real Coachella, not that crap that you see. Quetzal always keeps it real. Yeah. And I was like, yes, please take me. They had been doing a lot of work with the Purepecha community there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, so it was a great festival. You put on an amazing performance. And if I remember correctly, you were pregnant at the time.
Yes, I think I was.
Yeah.
What year was this?
I'm thinking maybe 2011, maybe.
Okay, so then it was 2012. So my daughter was born 2013.
Okay, so 2012. Yeah, so it was about that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first festival was 2011, and I think the second one we did was 2012. Yeah, and I just thought it was such a beautiful thing. You're on stage and just performing, and I mean, you put on a great performance. And just anyway, so
I'm just remembering of the belly, because I remember my husband always closing his eyes, like watching me on stage when I'm pregnant performing. Yeah. He's like, calm down, settle down.
Calm down. Yes.
Can't help it when the spirit moves me.
Yes.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. I really appreciate that, and being invited and just having those experiences, it's just really beautiful.
No, definitely. And then going into more of the activist and workshops that you've put on, or you're the co-founder of a group called the Artivist Entertainment.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming with the name mixing art and activism.
Yes.
And so, even just hearing your stories right now from early on, it seems like that's always been a big part. Can you talk a little bit about Artivist and what you're
working? Marta is the one that taught me about that name. I had never heard the term artivist before, but I love it so much because it exactly describes who I feel I've always been, and who I think a lot of us are, and for me, that's what hip hop is, that's who I learned from, is the groups that talk about what's going on in society, that, that there's a certain education around or embedded in the music. I mean, KRS-One, Yasin Bey, Talib Kweli, Lauryn Hill, the list goes on. Common, you know, Ice Cube. I was a huge Ice Cube fan when I was in my teens. I remember 15, 16 years old. I've been thinking about that recently. Sorry to take a tangent.
No, you're fine.
I've been thinking about how my politicization, how do you say it? Politicization? Is that the right way to say it?
I think so. We'll
Politicization,
run with it.
I don't know. English is my first language. I'm sorry. Anyway, my politicization has happened through hip hop music, through listening to lyrics, and I think even proximity to the Black struggle, which is the brown struggle and the Indigenous struggle, really, you know, at the end of the day, because none of us are free until we're all free. Just learning about it, even on the other side of the world, living in Australia, pre-internet, understanding the struggle, police brutality. How else would I have known about police brutality if I didn't listen to Ice Cube? You know? And the fact that it blows my mind that 2020 and people have been so unaware of what has been going on in this country. And to me, I'm like, how do you not know? I've known for almost 30 years. Like, how do you not know? And I'm not even from here. So, you know, I really thank hip hop and love hip hop and, you know, Black culture for educating me all those years ago and still continuing to educate me every day. But I don't know where it came from, but it's always been there. This notion that, as I said earlier, each one teach one. This notion of, it probably comes, you know, from my mom and the way that she is in the world. It's that you're of service to the community always, for the common good of humanity. Like, that's the reason why. It's not for personal gain or, you know, I don't see the world in the capitalistic terms of, I'm going to do something because I'm going to make more money, or it's going to give me status, or I'm going to climb this ladder, or what. Like, to me, that's never been a goal. Never. It's never been in my mind. Not even fame. I had a little bit of fame, a little taste of that, because I was on national television and radio in Australia, and you know, and they're still on an underground level, really, like not really famous at all. But the taste that I got, it was just a byproduct of what my job was, what I was there to do in my mind, which was, I believe in Australian hip hop and the stories of us, meaning, you know, people from non-English speaking backgrounds, and so migrants, people of African descent, that also have immigrated to Australia, Indigenous hip hop artists. Like, to me, I always wanted to put our stories on the map. I was told when I released my first single that by a radio station that Australians aren't ready to hear an Aussie accent rapping. That's what I was told. And I was like, okay, then. So I got in that position and I was like, here we go. Get ready, Australia. But like, it became, my mission was, I wanted to see myself reflected in the mainstream, because I had never seen that. I know that we exist, but I had not really seen that growing up. So that had always been it. Fame was a byproduct, you know? All that to say, the workshop started really early, and I never say that I taught, because I didn't really even know what I'm doing, but but I know how to create a space. I know how to facilitate. I know how to ask questions so that younger people that were in it, and it was usually young women and women of that are, we used to say disadvantaged, but underserved. Thank you. Underserved. You know, underserved communities. So it was really about just asking them questions and creating a space for them to then write their own songs and share their stories. And we got into, you know, Fruity Loops beat production, and we used to actually publish CDs and create performances at the end so that their families and friends could come along and see them perform. And actually, Trey and I worked on developing a curriculum that it was amazing. It was the first time that a hip hop course became certified. So it became a certificate 1 for technical college, which in Australia is called TAFE,
Yeah.
which are everywhere. And so if students did this course, it was a Cert 1, like the lowest certificate you can get, but it's a foot in the door to say, I achieved this, now I would like to go on to complete my high school certificate or take another course,
Yeah.
And so to me that means something, and that has always it's always been a part of me. It'll forever be a part of me, and I still continue to do it when I can. I'm sorry, I went down a whole other tangent, and you asked about Artivist Entertainment.
No, that's fine. And I kind of wanted to get back to how you talked about Ice Cube and, learning about whole different scene from music. And this reminded me of, right now, I think earlier this year, like the song Tupac Changes was back on the charts. And this
Really?
was written. Yeah, it was back on the charts. And with everything that's going on in 2020, and just the things that was written, like I think he recorded that song like 94, and just how you would think in 2020, just like you said, in 2020, you would think people would know about what's been going on for years. And I think a lot of has surfaced that, was being discussed in these areas,
that they weren't listening.
Served areas. And so a lot of times the reporters don't go to those underserved areas. So artists become those like reporters, right?
Absolutely. And that has always been like, okay, that's my job. So fast forward to this current album that is out, right? My latest album, Never Said Yes.
Never Said Yes, yeah.
The title track is about affirmative consent, and I watched The Hunting Ground. It was a movie about rape on college campuses in the United States. And I came out of that movie and I wrote that song. I was like, this is what I want to write about. And I wrote it for Peace Over Violence, who's an organization, a rape crisis center in Los Angeles that I volunteer with, and their spokesperson for Denim Day. April is their Denim Day is their day to bring awareness to sexual assault and violence. And and on the album it covers all different kinds of topics, but very purposeful. A song about child slave labor and in the chocolate industry and cocoa farming. It came from an article that I read about a boy. His name was Abdul, and he was taken from his family, and he thought he was going to further his education, but really he became enslaved, and he and what he had to endure working on that farm. So I wrote a song called Chocolate. I have a song called Crumble, which is about school to prison pipeline, just learning what that is, what the hell is going on there, and our kids, from being criminalized from such young ages, and the disproportionate amount of Black and brown youth that are being put into juvenile detention centers, which then, they age out and go into prison, and just trying to bring light to these issues, that exist. So that was really my mission for that album.
Yeah, you also have a song called Inshallah. And so this is Arabic.
Well, my mom is Turkish, so it's one of those words that exist in Turkish language as well because of that history. But they say my mom. So the story is I'm pregnant with Mandela, my daughter, and we go to Australia. We go to Sydney to visit my mom. And I tell my mom, and she just starts knocking on the table, mashallah, 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 which means God bless, God bless. And inshallah is God willing. And of course, my husband being the songwriter, everything is a song for him. And we're driving, I think, the next day, and he goes, that's a song. And I'm like, what? And he goes, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah, mashallah. He was like, that's your song right there. And so I wrote the song about my daughter, and it's, it's all the hopes and the worries and the fears, and it's all the things that go through your mind when you're becoming a parent, and for the first time, right? It's like not knowing what to expect, and then wanting peace in the world for her, and then thinking about just even your own relationship, like, will she love me when I'm stressed? Will
Yeah.
she forgive me? All those kinds of things. And it's a beautiful song.
No,
And then I had to, yeah.
no, I was gonna say, no, that's definitely one of my favorite songs on the album.
Oh, thank you. Me too. It's a bit of the light in the darkness, right?
Mhm.
It's sometimes my mom is like, you can write some happy songs too. And it's like, I'm trying, mom, I'm trying. But of course,
Yeah.
I had to write one for my son. So I think Inshallah was like the first song that I had written for that album, and
Okay.
The Joy was like the last one. The Joy is the song I wrote for my son, and I decided to ask wonderful Halim Al-Khatib, who played Kanun and Oud on Inshallah. I asked him to play the same thing, Kanun and Oud, on The Joy.
Okay. Okay.
He's
Yeah.
from Jordan, and a beautiful classic musician. And so he blessed both of those songs. So they kind of sit like brother and sister as well musically, which is really
Mm.
nice. And and the subtext of The Joy for me is, our beautiful brown babies, and
Mhm.
at what age do they become scary, and at what age do people start to fear our
Yeah.
babies. And that was
Right.
sort of in the back of my mind as I was writing it.
Mhm.
But it's really like he's the joy, and they're just remembering to show that those sides of ourselves, and to honor them, when we're in the struggle and we're constantly fighting. I have a auntie, and a South African woman who is an auntie to me in Australia, and I love her. Name is Vanessa, and I've known her since I was a teenager and family friend. And I remember talking with her once, and she said, rather than what do you fight against, what do you stand for? What do you stand for, my love? And to me, that's been like on the forefront of my mind the last few years as I start working on this new album or new EP. What am I
Mhm.
standing for, right? Let's speak into existence the reality that we want to see, the future that we want to live in. Let's talk about it as if it's present and call that in. I think it's important to do that work as well.
Absolutely. And so you touched on it a little bit. You talked about Aloe and everything being a song to him. But what is your writing and recording process?
Oh, pulling
Is it
teeth.
yeah.
My husband is an amazing storyteller. I'm very jealous because he can just write a song, he can just think of something and write it. My experience has always been that I think it's been therapy for me. And that's why
Yeah.
it's hard, because even as a teenager, I remember waking up middle of the night, having words in my head and writing them down, in the darkness on a piece of paper next to my bed, like having to get them out.
Mhm.
I always used poetry and writing as a way to process whatever is going on in my head. Um, it's been very therapeutic, and I haven't been able to make that jump into just writing for fun or about stuff
Yeah.
that doesn't, affect me. I mean, sometimes I do, like, writing about Abdul on the cocoa farm. That's not my personal experience, but it touched me in such a way, like it really affected me, that I was able to write about it. And I think that's where I am. It's like it always comes from these deep feelings, and I have to get into that space. There's one time, he's been such a great influence and beautiful partner in the way that and I think I have things to offer him as well. Don't get it
Mhm.
twisted. Uh, but yeah, I remember once he turned to me when I was writing I Am. I had the music going, and he said, just try something like a stream of consciousness, which I had never done before. He goes,
Mm.
try stream of consciousness. Just think of an idea and just go for it. And the word truth came to mind. Truth. What is truth? What is the truth? And I sat there and the song flowed out of I don't know where, but it just came and the 3 verses were written. I think it's the fastest song I've ever written. It just all came out and I didn't edit it, I didn't touch it. It is what it is. And it was such a beautiful experience to have that happen and to not, be so critical of every word and to overthink every line. And that was a really beautiful experience. So I'd love to try that exercise again.
Yeah. Again, thank you for taking the time. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, well, I haven't told you my whole life story. No. I guess the last thing I want to say is, with Artivist Entertainment,
Yes.
Artivist is myself, Aloe Black, Quetzal Flores, Alberto Lopez, and Veronica Gonzalez. And slowly, but surely we work on events, we support artists for positive social transformation, and we're still working on that. We produced Artivista events where we had lots of women on stage with one band, and we would jump on each other's songs and really collaborate. I think Artivist Entertainment is a way to just put a name and label on the work that we're all already doing, which is this collaborative process. It's always about collaborating and working together and being in community. I think for me that's the most important thing, which is hard because you're doing so much virtually right now. But to me, it's always been about the community and working together so we can all live better, happy, healthier lives.
Absolutely. And so anyone trying to find you online, where can they find you?
I think I'm most active on Instagram at Maya Jupiter. That's sort of my happiest place, or place that I like to share the most. I'd never tweet.
Yeah.
Today I posted about Stevie Wonder.
Yes.
Because give him his flowers while he's still here, and he's such an incredible man and human. And and I just thought it's hard to carry the weight of all the struggles of the world that we're exposed to every single day. And I'm trying intentionally to not just post about the heartbreaks for, to awareness, which is important, but to also post about the joy and the love, because we need that so much.
One of the last live shows that my wife and I went to was a Stevie Wonder show. It was just such amazing that still at his age just blew my mind. Like, still puts on such a great show.
Yeah. Exactly, which is why I'm posting a photo. I'm not going to wait,
Yeah, give him his flowers now for sure.
Yeah.
Any new music you're working on? Anything that people could look forward to?
Yes, I have been sitting on these beats from Miss Georgia Ann Muldrow for a couple of years now, and I was supposed to release it this year, and then COVID happened, and I went into a cave and hid under a rock. But now I'm back, and finding the balance again in mothering and making art and music. So that's what I'm working on, is an EP, and she's just, I think half the pressure is I have to take the pressure off myself because she's such a phenomenal artist that I'm scared that I won't live up to her standard. But I have to sort of just get that out of my head and just share my heart. At the end of the day, that's who I am, and that's all I can do. So
you have a title, working title?
Nope.
Nothing yet. Okay.
Nothing yet.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me. It's therapeutic to have these conversations.
It absolutely is.
I appreciate it. All right.
Again, you have a wonderful day, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, you too. All right. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Brotaron los lirios, las ceibas inmensas, la lluvia acarrecia la neblina densa. Un jilguero canta solo en la memoria, fragmentos de historia que no volverán.
I'm the healer. healer, protector, the teacher of time, the nurturer, the fighter, the enemy of lies. Staying quiet and still, I'm absorbing all stress until I explode. Then I am civil unrest. I'm the hope that was born in Malala's heart, the dream of Sandra, looking for a fresh start. I'm the will of Rayhan to keep Island safe, the fireborn in Annie after surviving rape. I'm a mother, a daughter, a grand and a great responsibility to support and create. I'm the fight against a corrupt prison system, standing on the front lines, robustly resistant. I'm the key that unlocks every detention center, the cord, the blood, the mighty placenta. I am fierce, ferocious, and furiously strong. I am of the earth, and this is my song.
Brotaron los lirios, las ceibas inmensas, brotaron los lirios que no volverán.
They try to bury us, they didn't know we would see. So we keep on watering and pulling out the weeds. They try to bury us, they didn't know we would see. So we keep on watering and pulling out the weeds. I'm relief, gazing in my newborn's eyes, her cackles, her laughter, and all of her cries. I'm a guardian, a keeper of tradition and faith, of memory and truth, the tomorrow that awaits. I'm an aspen connected to 1,000 trees, roots and leaves, fruits and seeds. I am fierce, ferocious, and furiously strong. I am Mother Earth, and this is my song.
Brotaron los lirios, las ceibas inmensas, la lluvia acarrecia la neblina densa. Un jilguero canta solo en la memoria, fragmentos de historia que no volverán.
They try to bury us, they didn't know we would see. So we keep on watering